An acting president takes power in Nigeria amidst mounting sectarian tension and evidence of systematic extrajudicial killings by security forces. But some are resisting the transfer of presidential power, and now a looming constitutional crisis along with the country's other woes. Is Nigeria on its way to becoming a failed state? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Mike Hanna. Nigeria's hard-won non-sectarian democracy is once again under threat. The country has a new interim leader, Goodluck Jonathan, who Parliament has established as acting president in the absence due to ill health of Umaru Yar'Adua. His first action to dismiss the powerful justice minister who opposed the parliamentary decision. This at a time of new evidence about extrajudicial killings and increased tension between the largely Muslim north and predominantly Christian south. We begin with this report from Rosa Ibrahimova.
Taking out onto the street, made to lie face down, and then shot in the back by Nigerian police. This chilling video obtained by Al Jazeera shows Nigerian security forces involved in what appears to be extrajudicial executions of members of the Islamist group Boko Haram. They proclaimed themselves opposed to Western civilization, and last July staged an uprising, attacking police stations and Christian churches. Just the latest images of the violence tearing Nigeria apart, that often pits one religious group against the other. The country is almost evenly divided between the Muslim north and the Christian south. That divide and tribal rivalries have claimed over 13,000 lives since the end of the military rule in 1999. Most recently, riots in and around the city of Jos in central Nigeria saw 400 people die. Mostly Muslims, women and babies were burned, stabbed and dumped in village wells. But experts caution sectarian tensions are not the only factor.
It's the problem of government discrimination, a policy of government discrimination, which denies Nigerians who cannot claim that their ancestors come from that place access to basic economic and educational opportunities. So all of this breeds a tremendous amount of frustration among the population, which we see evidenced in these sporadic, very deadly outbreaks of violence.
Nigeria has wealth. It's Africa's second largest economy and its largest oil producer. But the oil money, critics say, is benefiting only a select few. Rebels in the Niger Delta say they want those oil resources to work for the benefit of the people. The rebels have called off a truce with the central government. It's that kind of anger at perceived corruption that experts say is also making some Nigerians to turn to groups like Boko Haram. And the violence, analysts say, isn't driven only by religious tensions.
I think it speaks of a more broader problem of poverty and frustration, and I think that so long as the authorities at state and federal level fail to deal with those underlying causes, there must be a danger that this problem is going to increase rather than disappear.
More than half of Nigeria's population lives on $2 a day, growing poorer and angrier, while oil keeps making a few very rich. It's a simmering situation Vice President Goodluck Jonathan will have to address as he tries to fill the political vacuum as the acting president. Rosa Ibrahimova for Inside Story.
Joining us now to discuss this further are our guests. In Abuja, Mohammed Balori. He's a former government chairman in Borno State. In Manchester, Musa Aliyu from the Desmond Tutu Center for War and Peace Studies at Liverpool Hope University. And in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Buba Masawa. He's an associate professor of political science at Washington and Jefferson College. Now, in recent days, Al Jazeera broadcast footage from Borno State that constituted irrefutable evidence of extrajudicial killings. This was in July last year. No one has yet been held accountable. Let's begin with Mohammed Balori in Abuja. Is there a culture of impunity among the security forces?
Well, actually, this is a total lack of discipline from the security operators. It's very unfortunate that we saw what you shown in Al Jazeera International. that a policeman killing some innocent unarmed children. It's very unfortunate. But this is basically it's a tradition. Initially, the genesis of the Boko Haram itself as a result of conflict between a joint patrol team by the state governor, joint patrol police and the military. So they had a problem with the members of the Boko Haram. They shot some of them. They complained to the government that the government should do something and bring these security officers into book. For not doing that, they have been sending warnings that they will now take action by themselves. Consequently, that leads to the emergence of the Boko Haram.
Well, let's go to Musa Aliyu in Manchester. And this is one specific incident that we are referring to, but there have been numerous others and many allegations of excesses by the security forces. That question that I asked, is there a culture of impunity? Are these people being held accountable?
Absolutely, there is a culture of impunity. But then what we need to see also is the fact that there is a problem at the leadership itself. Because if the leader has taken enough responsibility, these things wouldn't be happening. You see, like my colleague just said, this issue has been reported by Human Rights Watch long ago, but nothing was done. Now, look at the case of just now. There are a lot of allegations against security operatives, extrajudicial killings that went over a period of time, but then nothing has been done. So it means the government also is complicit in this, because if they have done the right thing, then this thing wouldn't continue.
Buba Masiawa in Pittsburgh, we're hearing here that it's not just actions on the ground, it's also a central authority that is not fulfilling its function. Your view?
Well, indeed, there has been a culture of impunity. Similarly, the history of extrajudicial killings have been long in Nigeria, and people have come to expect some of those, unfortunately. And as my colleagues articulated their views, it is been a problem. But this problem points to the issue of accountability itself in general. Most people will agree with the notion that accountability has been lacking at different levels, and therefore this is just fitting into the general scenario of what is expected or what has been going on.
Civilian rule was established in 1999 in Nigeria after decades of military dictatorship. Violence really began the following year. More than 2,000 people were killed in clashes between Christians and Muslims when northern states attempted to introduce Sharia law. In 2001, at least 900 were killed in fighting in the central town of Jos. And then in 2004, hundreds were reportedly killed in the oil city of Port Harcourt. 700 more people were killed in November 2008 over disputed local elections in Jos. And last year saw some of the most violent eruptions. In July, at least 700 people were killed in an uprising by the Islamist militant group Boko Haram, dedicated to imposing nationwide Sharia law. And just last month, another outbreak of violence in Jos, at least 150 people killed in 2 days of fighting. As in most of the violence, sectarian division playing a part, but also perhaps masking underlying social and economic problems. Musa Aliyu in Manchester, is this question of sectarian divide actually concealing what are the major reasons behind this violence?
Like you rightly pointed out, this is not just an issue of sectarian violence in itself, but people frustrated. Imagine a situation whereby there's no leadership, there's no clear leadership in the country. People are frustrated, there's no work for the people, there's no food for the people, and then people are idle. What do you expect from people like that? You expect people to always take it upon themselves to go to go against the law of the country because they feel they have nothing to lose by doing what they are doing. Now imagine the case in the Niger Delta. There was a truce some times ago, but now there's a reversal of that situation because there is no one to continue with that situation, the amnesty that was granted. No one is there to continue with the promises that were made to the people in Niger Delta. So the whole situation boils down to a problem of leadership in the country.
Mohammed Balori, do you agree with that the underlying social, economic causes are responsible for ongoing violence?
I quite agree with his opinion, and that's exactly what it is. What I will add to it is that first let us understand the definition of Boko Haram. The meaning of Boko Haram is Western education is prohibited. And the reason why they said those who went to acquire the Western education, they specialize in injustice, corrupt practices, and looting. So therefore, they think is the method that they use in teaching the Western education that is bad. But the real thing is, the problem is with the leadership. We have a lot of young men and women, very strong and healthy young men and women, but full of poverty. The resources, they know that there's resources in their country, and these resources are not appropriately used for them. So the looting, the leaders are taking away the money, and as a result of prostration, everybody is vulnerable to engage in any kind of problem. You know, that's the whole thing revolves down to problem of leadership in the country.
Buba Masawa, we are hearing leadership, leadership, leadership. Do you think that that is the crux of the problem?
Well, the leadership question is a right question to ask, but I think it transcends beyond leadership. I think the issue of policy, application, and policy alternatives are very crucial to that. Now, it is possible to link those other issues to the question of leadership itself, but one has to be cognizant of the fact that the failure of leadership is perhaps attributed to the failure of to articulate public policy. And at different levels, why this might be easily blamed on one particular branch of government or the other, or perhaps blamed on states, governments, or even the federal government. But in general, I think we have to look at it in the context of policy application, and these issues that have been articulated by my colleagues play into that. If most of the young people are not necessarily given the opportunities of doing well, or perhaps in getting gainful employment, then you are likely to have the issues that they have talked about. But generally also, in terms of what has gone on in Nigeria, I think the crisis of legitimacy, we have still not resolved the problem, the simple problem of who can really be accountable, and accountability at different levels, or even the notion of legislative capacity or mandated expenditures are very crucial issues that play into all this. And therefore, it's possible to summarize it with the context of leadership, but I think it goes beyond the leadership question and looking at it in terms of a wider policy application that could involve both the private and public sector. I think it's assumed in Nigeria that when we talk about the failure of leadership, one is particularly talking about government leadership. But I think the leadership question should and perhaps should transcend what we articulated so far.
But let's take a look at the leadership structure itself, that question of leadership. Only in recent days you've had a shift in the presidency, the acting president being appointed by parliamentary vote, and yet there are major constitutional issues here. This would appear to be a constitutional problem, and equally as well, the unwritten agreement in Nigeria that the presidency will be rotated every second election between Christian and Muslim, and here we have a situation where a Christian president is taking over from a Muslim one, not at the regular time. Musa Aliyu, in Manchester, it appears to be the system itself that lends itself to this type of disruption that goes all the way down.
Well, I think the system is not perfect as it is, and we are not expecting it to be really perfect. But what we expect to happen is these people there should try in a way to accommodate what would be workable, in the sense that now we have a Christian president who is taking over from a Muslim leader that has been incapacitated. What should be done is to abolish that issue of zoning, which would make it impossible for a Christian leader to continue in the place of a Muslim leader. Something has to be done about that origin constitution or origin agreement. So something should be done about that, especially the issue of zoning. Otherwise, if Mr. Goodluck does very well now, and he wants to continue by standing election in 2011, there's going to be a constitutional problem in the sense that people will say he has taken, he has taken up the chances of people from the southern part of the country and the Christian people. But then I think it's not very democratic to have that kind of thing enshrined in an agreement, whether it is written or unwritten.
But you are mentioning there that issue of zoning. Are you speaking about regionalization?
The issue of zoning is, yes, in a way, it's that agreement that says if we have, for instance, now we have a Muslim president, the next election we have a Christian president from the south or any other part of the country, but not from the same place where the current president comes from. So that is the issue of zoning, which is fundamentally part of the PDP constitution. It has to be changed.
Mohammed Balori, in Abuja, this whole issue of regionalization, the very concept of Nigeria as a federal state, is there something perhaps wrong with the system that imposes boundaries on people who might not necessarily recognize those boundaries?
No, first of all, I think there's a point of correction in the dichotomy. The dichotomy is not about Muslim Christian in the north and south. Both in the north and the south, we have Muslims and Christians. But the dichotomy is about north-south. And this agreement that you're talking about is within the PDP, People's Democratic Party, the leading party in the country. That's their constitution, not a Nigerian constitution. In the north also we have Christians, and also south we have Muslims. The dichotomy is about north-south. And even that one is just the elites are taking advantage of this. Now, what Nigeria, whatever we say at the end, we have to come back to the issue of leadership. And the leadership not necessarily has to do with the government, societal, from the legislature, judiciary, all sort of things. For instance, why perhaps I think the government don't want to take action is to keep the people under threat. That when you misbehave, maybe you want to protest, the government will now send the police and the military to start killing you. And if they kill you, nothing is going to happen to them. So the police officers and the military, when they send them to destroy the civilians or kill them, they wouldn't mind because they know for sure nothing is going to happen to them, whatever they do afterwards. So I think it's a deliberate kind of a thing to create confusion to serve some few individuals' interests. It's still about the leadership.
Buba Masawa, we hear there the point of view that perhaps the activities by security forces, for example, are designed either to intimidate or take attention away from failures of those who are directing them. Is there any validity to that, do you believe?
Well, there is some validity to the argument. And yet, I think the bigger question is the notion of accountability in general. Most people do not see themselves as accountable, and there is a governance problem. The governance problem itself comes from the crisis of legitimacy. Going back to the current issue, what is going on today, of course, the four major issues came up as a result of this temporary transfer of power. The assumption, I think, someone made as though made the argument as though the presidency has already been transferred. I think this is still a temporary transfer of power, and we have to see it as such. And therefore, there is no necessarily a constitutional crisis, but there is constitutional ambiguity. The first reason I think that led to some of these issues that we're looking at in Nigeria is first, the idea that in the high stakes of power politics in Nigeria, there is a view that perhaps there will be a loss of authority once the temporary transfer of power is effected. Secondly, there is a notion that perhaps unelected officials can govern, and there are people who have seen themselves that way, and yet there are unelected officials who are attempting to govern in the absence of the president. And the third is the constitutional ambiguity that lies in Article 145 of the Nigerian Constitution in terms of the transfer of power, a temporary transfer of power. And fourth, of course, the polarization that we talked about is leading towards a vacuum that suggests that some people are likely to take advantage of the situation, or at least that they pry on the crisis of legitimacy that it goes on to do that.
But amidst
So
all of this,
with that
and let me
lacking,
put this to Musa Aliyu in Manchester, we have heard repeatedly leadership problems. We have heard the question of vacuum. And yet, is the government as it stands today within the system that is today, is it part of the solution to the ongoing issues within Nigeria, or is it indeed a major part of the problem?
Well, the government could be seen both ways. It's supposed to be part of the problem, I mean the solution. But in a way, the way as it is, as my colleague just rightly pointed out now, the sort of power politics going on in Nigeria makes it more of a problem than a solution. For instance, we had a president that was incompetent, not because of his will, but because he was unwell. He knew he was unwell. He did not make it clear to the nation that he was not well. And then he went away on treatment. Now, with that, he created a vacuum in the presidency, which the vice president constitutionally allowed to to continue as the president, was not even allowed to act as the president because there are people around the incumbent president that made it very hard for him to become an acting president. This is a constitutional problem, a constitutional crisis, which has to be dealt with the way it is. But I see the problem, being the government itself not willing to do what it's supposed to do, but like being accountable to the people. And then also the fact that the people around the president made it very difficult for the president to work the way he's supposed to work as an elected president. And they are still within the presidency now, and they are going to make it very difficult for the acting president to do anything tangible for the country or the people of the country.
Mohammed Balouri, let me put to you, we've heard various issues, various problems, but how can one cut through it all? What can be done to reclaim a democracy, a viable, socially fair democracy for the people of Nigeria? What is the single issue that has got to be dealt with?
Well, first of all, we have to appreciate the fact that there's a problem with the Constitution itself. Now we're saying probably constitutionally it's not appropriate for the legislators to legislate for the vice president to be acting president. Now, is it also constitutional for a country to stay without president for nearly 80 days or so? So these are the questions. Though I'm not a lawyer, but I hope the legislators will look into how best they can amend this kind of situation. As rightly pointed by Professor, that we have some unelected people are now going to determine the fate of a country, which is very unfortunate. Most of the people we have as members of the Federal Executive Council are selfish. This thing would have been done long before now. But nobody wants to do that one because they are afraid. Maybe they will be shipped. Maybe they can be changed by the vice president when he's confirmed to be the acting president. So these are the issues. We need some patriotic people at all level of government or at all tiers of government. That is to say, who actually have the country at heart, so that they will do as much as possible to serve the interests of the country. Not a kind of leaders that they always think of what I can get out of this situation.
Leaders to serve the interests of the country, that is the final word in this particular program. Thank you to our guests in Abuja, Mohammed Balouri, in Manchester, Musa Aliyu, and in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Buba Masawa. Thank you, gentlemen. And thank you so much for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. We welcome your comments and suggestions. Please email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. I'm Mike Hanna. Goodbye for now.